number 4 or something like that in our little quick thought series. I wanted to talk about something that's been raised recently in legislation, and it's the topic of vaping. I'm sure you've all seen. Dang this camera! Hold on a second. I'm sure you've heard something about it in the news or what have you. There's a lot of mass hysteria today about the dangers of vaping. A lot of the mainstream media, particularly news outlets like ABC, CBS, NBC, and others like that of their ilk, are producing a lot of stories that talk about all these, these individual cases of teenagers that have been hospitalized due to vaping, with these mysterious lung illnesses and diseases, and how they get rushed to the hospital with all these bizarre symptoms, and they're put in intensive care. I think there's been a couple deaths. I didn't look that far into it, but uh, let's get one thing straight. I think by now we can all pretty much acknowledge that any kind of hysteria that overwhelms the national conversation should be taken with a massive grain, many grains of salt. Let's not take it at face value. If there's anything we've learned is that our media today is interested in one thing only, and that's on the internet, clickbait and views and money, as far as ads and viewership on television. In other words, they want your attention, and they don't care how they get it, they're going to get it one way or another. So, like most stories out there, there is a little tiny grain of truth covered and that a little tiny grain of truth is what starts this, and then that snowballs as this hysteria begins, and then all because of the hysteria they say, oh, okay, well, we can make money off of this, so they all just snowballs until it's very hard to decipher what's true and what's not. I'm not even going to attempt to really dig deeply into the whole debate over vaping, except to express a couple concerns. Number one, um, as I said before, we should be immediately suspicious whenever there's a public health crisis and hysteria following quickly on its heels, uh, especially when you see, as I have, videos coming out of congressional videos where people speaking on behalf of the vaping industry are demonized by people like Rashida Tlaib in one of the videos that I saw. It's the same kind of and Rashida Tlaib was introducing the same kind of emotional line of argument that her and her Democratic followers on the far extreme left. It's the same type of thinking they use to make us believe in the Russian hoax, or not that I'm saying these things are linked, but I see the same approach in this vaping issue that I did with the Russian hoax, with now this Ukrainian thing, just anything that the media latches onto. Rational thinking and actual objective evidence is thrown out the window, and what replaces it is just an emotional response. And anybody who wants to actually think clearly and concisely and actually look at what's going on for what it is demonized and told, in the case of the vaping, told you don't care about our teenagers, you don't care about our kids, and this is absurd. So I mean, that's number one. We should not believe the hysteria. Tone it down about 6 or 7 notches, and you'll be starting to get closer to what the truth probably is. Second, if you do actually do some real digging into what's being talked about in this whole vaping uh, nightmare that they claim our country's been pressed into, um, what you quickly see is that almost all of the illnesses and almost all of the deaths and almost all of the health related issues that people are having are not because of tobacco related oils or vaping juices or whatever you want to call it, or the CBD or any of that kind of stuff. I don't know a whole ton about it. I do vape, by the way, just so we're clear here, but I'm trying to keep my personal subjective opinion out of this portion of what we're talking about here, at least. Um, but most of the people that have had issues are not because of regular tobacco, nicotine, vape flavors, and all that kind of stuff. It's because of illegal THC or marijuana. Um, Flavors that are on the basically on the black market that you buy off the street. So almost all of these people that are having health issues are because they are vaping fluids that they have bought illegally off the black market, just as you would buy marijuana or any other illicit substance. And that's what's causing the overwhelming majority of these illnesses is illicit, illegal, black market, THC based, marijuana based fluids, vapors, or yeah, fluids. Um, so it is not the tobacco fluids that you would buy or the bottles of vape that you would buy at a legitimate store down the street. That is not as what is by on the whole causing these issues. So that's number two, and you will not hear that from most of the reporting. I mean, they may say it, with an asterisk as a footnote at the very bottom of the story, but that's not something they want to emphasize because that would reduce the hysteria, and they're all about just creating pandemonium and fear. Third, think about the money here. Why is it that before a legitimate actual investigation can take place into the vaping industry, they're seeking to ban it when it very easily all they could do is just put in place regulations and stipulations and maybe raise the age of the people that can actually purchase the stuff legally, enforce IDs the same way we would with liquor or tobacco. Why not do that instead of just going outright and banning the stuff? If you look into this, I mean, think about it just for a minute. Who is being harmed by the vaping industry? Money talks. Let's not be deceived. Let's not be naive here. If somebody's looking to ban an entire industry that is taking millions of people away from big tobacco, would it not make sense maybe that big tobacco with their lobbyists in Washington are behind the push to ban vaping nationwide? I mean, as we speak, the Trump administration is talking about and has been talking about for several weeks now. Melania Trump is spearheading, I believe I've heard, this movement to ban nationwide vaping flavors so that the only ones that would be legal would be menthol and regular tobacco, which is, I mean, you might as well just drink a whole bucket of puke. I mean, you're basically killing the industry at that point, and they know that, and that's the whole intent, is to kill the industry. But why all of a sudden, you can't make me believe that just because and I'm not saying this to be callous, it's tragic if anybody dies from anything, and if people are dying from vaping, it should surely be investigated. But a handful of people end up sick, and we're going to ban the entire industry. When right over there, big tobacco is killing 400,000 people every year. And yes, there's regulations. Yes, there's stipulations. Yes, they're doing everything their damnedest to enforce ID purchases. So you can't be under 18 and buy a pack of cigarettes or whatever the law is at this point. But they're not banning cigarettes, and they kill 400,000 people a year. Tobacco or alcohol is the same thing. Hundreds of thousands of people die from alcohol-related issues every year. DUIs, DUI car crashes, cirrhosis of the liver. Alcohol destroys every organ or affects every organ in your body, from your brain down through your stomach, your liver, your pancreas, your everything gets affected when you drink to excess. And alcoholism rates are rising. So, and we're not seeing alcohol being banned. So why is vaping being banned so fast? This thing just sprung up in popularity relatively recently, and already they're going to ban it. It's the FDA, because the vaping is outside of like the FDA and all these federal bureaus that regulate things. It's operating outside of their jurisdiction, and they don't like that because anyone that's within within their jurisdiction is, paying their user fee, their tax. So this is not, let's just be fair and honest here. This is probably has absolutely nothing to do with public health or public well-being or the well-being of society and don't be deceived, people. Don't be deceived into thinking that these legislators actually care about whether your child is vaping or not, or whether your teenager enjoys snackerdoodle or bubblegum flavored vape, or is just grinding it out with menthol. Spare me the faux outrage and moral soapbox nonsense. Please don't believe that, because that's not what's happening here. 9 out of 10 people in Washington could not care less about your kids or my kids. Please. This is about money, just like anything else in Washington is about money. Now, I live in Pennsylvania, so what I've read about this is that Scott Perry is watching to see what goes on in Washington, and then he will follow suit, probably. So if Washington bans vaping flavors outright, then that means then it then goes to the states, as well it should, to make up their own minds on this issue. Personally, the federal government has absolutely no business getting involved in this. It should be down to the states from the beginning, and they should shut up and stay out of it. It's none of their dang business who vapes, what, where, or when. It is none of their business if I go into my backyard and crush up a soda can, poke holes in it, and smoke compost. It's none of your business. I could chew on eggshells and put them in my eyes for all they. It is none of your business what I do with my personal body. As the federal government, you have no right to tell me what I can put in my body. That's just my opinion on it, but I think that's constitutional, to say the least. I have a very libertarian view on that as far as that goes. I think what you put in your body as far as your own personal well-being is between you and God. And obviously, I think from a biblical perspective, it is not morally right to abuse your body. That's why, this may be controversial, and I'm sure some people will disagree with it, but the whole reason that I started even vaping to begin with was to quit cigarettes, and cigarettes are no matter what your opinion of vaping is, they're far more harmful, far more destructive to your overall health than vaping ever will be. Again, almost 500,000 people, 400,000 people die every year from cigarette-related illnesses. Contrast that with vaping, which is, a few hundred at most. At most. It's just that the media is publicizing every single instance where there's an illness, and keep in mind also that a lot of the illnesses that have been blamed on vaping have not proven to have been the consequence of vaping. It hasn't been proven yet, and even if they could provide a causal link between the two of them, it does come down to which type of vape was this person? Was it Juul? Was it e-cigarettes? Was it those blue devices? I have a traditional mod with the glass chamber at the top, and you pour the vape into it, and then you just suck on it like a pipe, basically. But this is not. Which one were they using? Maybe that particular one just has some modification to it that if it were changed, the person would never have gotten ill. Like anything else, these things are a learning experience. You learn and you better things as you go. That's what any producer of any kind of good is going to do. So again, banning it outright is just a overly dramatic reaction to something which to me just reeks of hypocrisy, a total lack of genuine care. and it betrays, the real motive, which would have to be money. What else drives these things except for money? Keep in mind that big tobacco has been getting shafted left and right by all these regulations, these lawsuits, people suing big tobacco because they smoked for 30 years and then, oh gee, I have lung cancer, so now I'm going to sue the tobacco company. A lot of this has to do, and I'm not going to go into this because it's not, but it is related, because nobody today in America wants to take personal responsibility for anything anymore. So you smoke cigarettes for 30 years and you get cancer. You knew that cigarettes could give you cancer. It's your fault you have cancer. I would say the same thing about myself. I hope I didn't jinx myself, but I smoked for a number of years. If I get cancer from that, it's going to suck. I pray that that doesn't happen. But at the same time, I'm the one that chose to smoke the cigarettes for all those years, okay? I'm not going to go and sue Camel or Marlboro, okay? It's a tough pill to swallow, but you smoke the cigarette, you deserve the cancer. So do I, okay? That's just reality, that's life. It would be a lot better off. We would all be a lot better off in this country if people would just take personal responsibility for the choices that they make. The same goes for this vaping. I did some research on it. I didn't just blindly buy what we call a mod and start doing this. The whole intent was to step down in the nicotine milligrams. I'm down to 3 now, and then eventually just be done with everything. I haven't been vaping for years and years and years, maybe 2 months at the most, not that long. But I haven't touched a cigarette in months now. And again, there's absolutely no comparison between the two. The sheer number of chemicals that you're putting into your body with one cigarette don't even compare to vaping, which have a mere handful. Are they good for you? All of the chemicals that are in vaping, the fluids? No, I'm sure they're not. But again, it's a mere handful compared to thousands with a cigarette. There's actually ground up glass in menthol cigarettes, and what they do is the little glass cuts your lip a little bit so that the menthol can better absorb into your skin, into your body, and it's more addicting, more satisfying that way, and you crave it more. So they're actually putting ground up glass in cigarettes. You're not going to find that in vaping. Um, Also, the nicotine milligrams, you can step down in the amount of milligrams that you're taking in with the vaping fluids. I'm down to 3 milligrams, then it's down to 1.5, and then 0, and then you're done. This is how I get off things. It's how I had to with maintenance programs when I was addicted to certain things that I've talked about in other podcasts. I had to go into a maintenance program. Doing cold turkey for me has never worked. In fact, it always just backfires. So this, again, let's just have a little perspective here. Millions of people now have used vaping, whether it's Juul or e-cigarettes that came out first. I remember when I used to walk past people doing it with the little e-cigarette, the vapor coming out, and they thought they were cool because they get to do it at a pagoda in the mall. And I thought it was so stupid, and I was like, I'll never do that. Never say never. Anyway, but there's so many different variations on these things, whether it's Juul or these new blue things that came out, or the e-cigarettes or the mod vape that I have. I guess the more traditional component thing. And millions of people have now used them to quit cigarettes. And they're now the counter argument to that is that a lot of teenagers are being enticed by all these different flavors to start vaping, and then they abuse them. There's been stories that I've heard where some teenagers actually drink the fluid. But you cannot blame vaping companies for stupid teenagers. I'm sorry, and I'm not trying to be harsh. If your child has ended up in the hospital because he drank a vaping fluid, this is how he learns the tough way. Uh, why would you do that? It's just like blaming Tide because kids were eating the Tide Pods, I think it's for the dishwashers. They were eating those things. Are you going to now sue Tide because your son is an idiot? I mean, come on now. You can't blame these companies because you didn't raise your son up to know not to eat Tide Pods or drink vaping fluid. Where are we gonna sue like landscaping companies because your son chews on grass? I mean, come on now. Uh, Anderson Windows is going to be sued because your son gets his rocks off by smashing his head just randomly through glass, and now it's Anderson Windows' fault. If you hadn't made that glass so squeaky clean and shiny, my son wouldn't have put his head through the window. Come on. Again, people just refuse to take personal responsibility for their own stupidity and for their own issues. If I believed in evolution, I would say this is clear proof of natural selection, weeding out the idiots. But I don't. It doesn't change the fact that people that eat Tide Pods are just idiots no matter what. But I felt like I had to say something about this because I went into the vape store near my house because I had to buy it's a filter basically for the mod, and the lady in there they had all these signs up there, saying illegal, illegal, illegal in front of all these bottles, and I was like, what is that about? And she said, well, we wanted people to get an idea for what this shop would look like if all these bans go through. Basically, every bottle you see up there would be illegal. I mean, in reality, they would have to get rid of everything. It wouldn't just be sitting there, but you get the idea. And the store would have to fold and then go under. I mean, all these places would go under. So you're basically driving out of business all these legitimate business operations. They carded me the minute I walk in there. I look like I'm over 16, or at least I think I do. Um, I've never been in a vape store yet that hasn't carded me, so it looks like they're doing their job and keeping underage minors out of there. And if there happens to be an 18 or a 19-year-old who goes into a vape store, produces his ID, and then walks outside and drinks this stuff, I say you got what you deserve. You deserve to have your stomach rot out from underneath you, you bonehead. What? I mean, who does that? At a certain point, you just need to admit, my son is stupid. I went to college, my wife went to college, my son eats Tide Pods. I mean, you got to do something in this life, I guess. And everyone has gifts, and my son's gift is eating Tide Pods and drinking vape fluid. Um, if there's a PhD in stupidity, he has it, and a master's in moron. But but the media latches onto this stuff, and because nobody wants to take responsibility, they just latch on to the vaping industry. It's your fault that our sons are stupid and that we didn't raise them to have common sense. It's your fault that we didn't teach our kids, let's not drink in the game called let's drink and eat everything under the sink is not the best game to play. That's the game you never play. But you didn't teach your kids that. You told them that Comet was something that you should just pour over your head and ha 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 ha. No. I mean, come on. Where are the parents in this? Where are the parents keeping their kids from drinking vape fluid? Where are the parents keeping Tide Pods out of their 17-year-olds' ravenous fingers? I don't understand it. But what I do know is that this is just another instance where the federal government and now the state governments are just cramming their hands into our, just basically like a giant person over your house, just reaching their hands completely around your house and looking in all your windows. What are you doing in there? I want a piece of that action. That's all this is. It's just them just over inserting themselves into every issue they can possibly get themselves involved in. Um, it may be, I know a lot of people won't agree with me, but I think that a lot of our issues with drugs would be solved if we would just decriminalize them. That doesn't mean that we support drug abuse, and that doesn't mean that you go so far as some of the places in Europe, like in Amsterdam, where they used to have clinics with clean needles all ready for the junkies to come in and shoot up with, so that you're giving them a safe place. The argument was, at least they have a safe place to shoot up, and if they overdose, the police or the paramedics are there there with Narcan to I don't believe in going that far with it, but I think decriminalizing it, not criminalizing addiction, which is a serious moral issue, the only reason that there are real legality or legal issues from it is because it's illegal. And you may say, duh, but no, actually, no. If it was decriminalized, if being in possession of it was not a crime, but rather something else in the manner of getting them help could be worked out with it. One major step would be to take the rehabs out from the clutches of the insurance companies, privatize the rehab clinics so that they are owned by private citizens and by doctors, their own private practice, so they can determine what they will charge for a patient coming into the clinic. Instead, what's happened, just like almost anything else in America, is that a lot of these rehabs and these maintenance programs like methadone and Suboxone, they realize that addiction is big business. So here's a big part of the pie that we want a slice of, and so they charge, I mean, astronomical amounts of money for methadone, for Suboxone. Um, Suboxone is being taken to court by the government, I believe, in the largest fine ever levied, I think, on a maintenance type drug so far. I think it was $1.2 billion because Suboxone was selling their strips. I forget the technical name for it, but it's the strips that you put under 8 milligram strips that you put under your tongue, and they were basically just selling them to people under the guise of the marketing them by saying that they're not that addictive, they're far less addictive than the pill form, the potential for overdose is almost negligible. Well, none of that was true. They're just as addictive as ever before, and you can overdose just as easy on the strips as you can on the pills. So they're being taken to court and fined, I think, $1.2 billion by the federal government. Massive amount of money. These people are not interested in actually, they want more addicts. They don't want this issue to go away because what's their solution? Even though I will speak very highly of maintenance programs if done right, I've used methadone legitimately through a doctor to get off my own addiction issues in the past. Um, but just look, their solution to addiction is further addiction. Now, again, I see both sides of this because I would also say that the best way to get off illegal drugs is with doctor prescribed maintenance drugs. Going cold turkey almost never works unless you've only been abusing your substance for like 5 or 6 months. It's just not going to work. At least not for me, it won't. And for most other people, put it this way: the relapse rate for people on heroin coming out of a 30-day rehab, which is a traditional rehab, is upwards of 90%. I think it's upward near 98% of people that first use rehab to get off of heroin will relapse and return. 98% of them. I know I was one of that 98%. It's almost impossible not to be. In fact, I would say that probably most of that 2% don't return because they die. Almost everybody is going to go through the program more than once if you've been using dope for any significant portion of time. So, and it on the decriminalization, just think of how many countless people, how many lives would be saved if there wasn't such strict penalties for drug dealers that maybe give a dose out to somebody, the person takes it in their apartment, overdoses, the drug dealer flees the scene, the person dies, and the drug dealer is always going to flee the scene if he's facing life in prison. So decriminalize the drug. He will call 911 because he's not facing life in prison at that point, and the person's life is saved, and they can potentially get help immediately. Now, obviously, there's more that needs to be worked into what I'm talking about, but criminalizing addicts accomplishes absolutely nothing. Taking somebody who has really no criminal background whatsoever but has an addiction issue, arresting them and then putting them in prison, all it does is turn them into a criminal, an actual criminal as a person, because you're putting them in a prison that is full of career criminals, people, some people that are there for life. There is no compartmentalization for the most part amongst prisoners. So you're putting somebody who has no real criminal history but was arrested for having a bundle of heroin. Let's say they were a good kid that just got caught up in drugs, but they've never stolen, robbed, or raped, or pillaged, or murdered, or all these things. They finally got caught with a bundle of heroin. Bam, you're going to jail for, let's say, 6 months. Whatever, they violated parole, probation, whatever, they kept peeing dirty, who cares? But then you put them in there with people that are in for life, rapists, career robbers, arsons, the list goes on and on. And then so they, and because they're arrested and put in prison for just this bundle of dope, there's this bitterness towards the legal system. Maybe they wanted to get help, but they didn't know how, and now they don't have a choice about getting help. They're thrown in the clink instead. Drugs are just as available, are just as readily available in a lot of prisons, and then they're put in prison with a lot of criminals who are going to now they're going to associate with on a daily basis. And these are not people that are interested in the addict kicking his addiction and learning from this 6 month stint, let's say, and bettering themselves and getting out and turning their life around, repenting of said sin and turning their life to Christ, going to college, bettering themselves. These criminals have no interest in that. What they're going to do is take the person under their wing, feed the bitterness that that the person already the addict already has towards the legal system now, and they, by the time they get out at 6 months, you have an actual criminal, somebody who has all the attributes of an actual career criminal now. And then they will go on to reuse the drug because you've given them no reason not to. And this time they will rob and steal and do all these other things, and they'll be right back in prison where they started, 10 times worse off. And then they'll spend several years, and it's just a cycle that goes on and on and on. If you had just not put them in jail in the first place, and instead maybe put them in a privatized rehab system that is ran by a doctor who sets his own rates, that's actually affordable for the average person in the street, who can maybe subscribe medication that is no longer through the insurance company, but these companies charge whatever price they want, so that there's competition in the market. I mean, am I the only one that thinks of these things? It's an outrageous dichotomy that they give you, this false dichotomy when they say, look at the system, how broken it is. So it's either this, the broken system, or it's socialism. Well, no, actually, how about it's neither of those? How about we go back 60, 70, 80 years in this country when doctors' offices were privatized, when their practice was privatized, where they could work out payment agreements on their own with their patients. So it doesn't have to be government regulated socialist healthcare system, which is crap, or the overpriced insurance system that is there today, in which doctors are just afraid to even sit down and have a conversation with the patient, let alone try to work with them if they can't afford the medication because their insurance runs out. Goodbye, see you, don't care about the cancer, just don't come here because your insurance isn't paying for it anymore. I mean, it's a joke. Um, but the long story short of this, getting back to the vaping, is I just hope that if anyone vapes or knows somebody that vapes, actually take the time to dig into this and do a little actual research and reading about it. I'm not saying in any way, shape, or form that vaping is what everybody. If you never smoke cigarettes, don't vape. Just don't do it. I would say that, nobody should just go and vape. It's not something to just start doing. But if you want to get off cigarettes and you're quitting cigarettes, and it's a good way to do that, a less harmful method of, if you don't believe that you can just quit cold turkey, because I know I can't. Um, and you're planning on not vaping forever. You're going to step down in the nicotine milligrams and eventually just be done. I think it's great for it. Again, I'm not saying that this is something that teenagers should be doing. I think we should discourage that. They should enforce the IDs. How old are you before we'll sell this to you? I need proof. Let me see your driver's license. This is common sense stuff. The same stuff they do for cigarettes or alcohol. Why can't we just do it for vaping? you know and yet the alcohol industry will kill thousands and thousands and thousands of people every year. The tobacco industry will kill upwards of half a million people every year. And yet still, when somebody thinks of something else, that's just a tad bit less dangerous and you can use to get off big tobacco, they'll squash it again and create national hysteria, just like they are doing with this. And then we all get to feel good about ourselves. We saved our teenagers. Put away the vape and go buy a pack of Marlboros, you delinquents. All right. Well, anyway, that's the episode for this week. Do a little research on that vaping. We'll be back next week with another episode, of course, as always. In the meantime, good night and God be with you.